Okay, today we're going to finish up the first part of this next section. So we've got lesson 35 we'll be testing on Monday. So right now we're going to talk about word problems, about comparing, and also about elapsed time. It's a pretty short lesson, so hopefully we'll get through it kind of quickly. However, if you have questions about anything, make sure you ask, and we can go over some examples together if we need to. Okay, first of all, when we are comparing, you're taking a larger amount of something and a smaller amount of something, you're finding the difference. That might be older minus the younger to find the difference in age. Taller minus the shorter to find the difference in height. Faster minus the slower to find the difference in speed. Or later minus earlier times to find the difference in time that has gone by. So these are just some examples of comparing two different things. Okay, if I have larger minus smaller, you might see something like 7 different containers are on a loading dock awaiting shipment. Okay, so we're talking about size here. The containers are all going to be different size. The heaviest container weighs 245 pounds. The containers range in weight from 245 pounds to 160 pounds, meaning that the lightest container is 160 pounds. So if the heaviest is 245 and the lightest is 160, then how many pounds more is the heaviest container than the lightest container? These are comparing type questions. Okay, so on your whiteboards, y'all go ahead and solve the problem how you think this problem needs to be solved. All right, guys, most of you had this on your board, 245 minus 160, and you subtracted, and you ended up with 85 what? Pounds. Good. Yes, that would work. Okay, if I have time difference, I've got a later time minus an earlier time to get a difference. Okay, so if you can picture it like on a number line. Okay, here's my earlier time. This is where I started. All of this time goes by until I get to my later time. That is what we call the elapsed time. How much time has gone by? We've talked about this in an earlier lesson. So you've heard this phrase before. Elapsed time is the amount of time that goes by. So how many years were there from 1492 to 1620? How could I solve that? Do that on your whiteboard. Okay, so what I'm seeing a lot of you do is you're taking that later year from 1620, subtracting where we started, 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Yep. So you subtract to figure out the difference, how much time was in between. So you're going to subtract, or you're going to have to borrow and regroup first. But then you borrow here, and this becomes 10. So we end up with 128 years. And that's what every one of you had on your board. So good job, guys. Okay, if I'm talking about time like on a clock, okay, here's another example. A school day at Edison School begins at 8:10 a.m. The school day ends at 3:15 p.m. What is the length of a school day at Edison School? Sometimes picturing a clock or drawing out a clock is a little bit more helpful than just subtracting, okay? Because you have to do later minus earlier. But if I did this, my later time minus my earlier time, what do you think is going to happen? It doesn't make sense, okay? So sometimes it's helpful to kind of draw and then count up to the time that we ended, okay? So where did we start? We started at 8:10, right? So my shorthand's at 8. Right here, my long hand, minute hand is pointing at 10, okay? Okay, so I've got 8:10 illustrated on my clock. If I go 1 hour, that would be 9:10, right? If I go another hour, I'm at 10:10. How many hours have I gone by already? 2 hours. Here at 11:10 would be 3 hours. 12:10 is 4 hours. 1:10 is 5 hours. 2:10 is how many? 6 hours. Okay. 3:10 is 7 hours, but then I've got to get to 3:15. So I'm trying to look at this.
3 hours and 5 minutes.
Yeah, wait, 3 hours and 5 minutes?
3 hours and 15 minutes. Oh, sorry.
This is where I want to get to. Okay, the 3:15. So I'm counting my hour hand. How many places did my hour hand move around? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. My minute hand moved 5 minutes. So what would my answer be on this?
7 hours and 5 minutes.
7 hours and 15 minutes? 5 minutes. You want to compare how far around I went from this hour hand all the way to this hour hand, and then from my minute to my other minute hand, okay, to figure out the duration. So in times like this, when we're dealing with actual time frames, AMs and PMs, sometimes it's more helpful to draw a clock and then work it out, like draw it out, count around the clock to figure that out. Okay guys, that's our lesson. Yeah, short. Which means you have almost 30 minutes for your written practice, which means if you work really hard, you might not have anything to do this weekend for math.
Yeah, that's not happening.
You're going to do lesson 35. It starts on page 239, and numbers 2 through 5 require you to write a equation before you start.